one of the two. Okay, so we're going to move on to item 2, adoption of the regular meeting agenda. Is there anyone on the leadership team who has any proposed changes? Seeing none, we'll accept the agenda as presented. Now, item 3, public comment. This is a portion of the meeting we would encourage anyone from the public who would like to make either a comment or ask a question for the community council is welcome to come forward and do that. You can either speak at the podium, grab a microphone, whatever's most convenient. But anyone who would like to speak to the community council on something that's not on tonight's agenda, so something that's not on the agenda would be the appropriate topic at this point. So is there anyone who cares to speak? Okay, very good. And I'm guessing this is a high school class and participation. Is that what's going on here? I see the dialogue back and forth a little bit. Very good, very good. So it's been a while since we've had one. You assume you're at Oak Ridge probably? Okay, very good. So welcome, and we appreciate your involvement, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit about civics this evening. So thank you for your attendance. So with that, we'll move on. Seeing no public comment, and we didn't have anybody hand raised, right? I didn't see anybody. No. All right, so we'll move on to item 4, our guest speaker. And it's my pleasure to introduce Karen Coleman. She is our El Dorado County Treasurer Tax Collector. And Karen's been in the role for a couple years now and done some really good things. And so we wanted to give her the opportunity to share with you some of the things that she's looking at in her office, with particular emphasis on some of the things that are happening with interest rates and the way the county invests money. And it's not only the county money, it's special district money. The county is the keeper of a lot of different resources. And we're always trying to look at how do you get the best return on that money that's sitting there waiting to be used for some given project. And then also she's done some new things with our tax bill with a QRC code, which is kind of unique, I think. And so Karen, please just give us a little bit about your background and go from there.
Should it stay green? Okay, there it goes. Can y'all hear me?
WendiMae, can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Do I need to unmute?
Looks like you're okay. So go ahead.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I'm Karen Coleman. I'm El Dorado County's Treasurer and Tax Collector. I've actually worked for the county since 2009. I was the CFO at Health and Human Services, and I was the CFO in Community Development before I went to the Tax Collector's Office as the assistant. And then when Sherry Rafferty retired, I got up enough courage to run for office. Prior to that, I spent 6 years at El Dorado Irrigation District. And prior to that, I spent 11 years at El Dorado County Office of Education. So I've worked at just about every local government of county in the county. Mm-hmm. I really want to thank everybody for coming out and welcome. I was always involved in student government when I was even in elementary school. I think it's very important to be involved. My first term is actually coming to an end, but I ran this last time unopposed. So I'll be your treasurer and tax collector for another 4 years. So thank you. It's actually quite humbling to be an elected official. And I really want to talk a little bit just about the office in general. And there we go. So the vision in our department is that we collect, we bank, we invest, and we serve. And then the mission is to effectively manage the financial resources of El Dorado County within our purview through efficient collections, daily banking, safe and sound investments, and exceptional public services. This is a little bit of information about the taxes, and right now all I have is the 21-22 information. So for our secured property taxes, we issued 128,000 bills, a little bit more. Total billed was 444 million, and we collected 443 million because we have excellent taxpayers, steadfast taxpayers in El Dorado County. We have unsecured taxes, which are business property taxes, boats, airplanes. Sometimes there's other interests that are considered unsecured. After the first year, a mobile home rolls from secured to unsecured. So we have about 7,600 bills, a little bit over 7 million billed, and about 7.5 collected. And then TOT, you guys all know what transient occupancy taxes are for short-term rentals, 9.7 million. That's about 2.1 million more than we've ever collected in the county and over last year. And then we also started collecting cannabis taxes, a total of 500,000 for that. There's other fees that we collect, like for business licenses also, which is around 600,000. But that revenue comes directly into my department. It is not part of the general fund, except for it offsets some general fund costs from my department. My first year was a blur. My father was really sick. My parents are long-term residents of El Dorado Hills. They owned a home. Well, my mom still lives in it over here in Shadow Hills Estates. And so my first year was kind of a blur because I was just getting my feet underneath me. My dad passed away in 2019. And then, as you all know, COVID hit. But the first thing that I did was I had to do a major website update. One of the things that I thought was important for customer service was to have email addresses where the public could communicate directly with our department. That had never been on the menu before. And so now people can email us directly. It helps with the phone queue. I don't know if any of you have ever had to call through the phone queue, but it has taken our phone queue down so that we can respond quicker. And the subject matter experts in each one of these areas can help the customers when they call, email in. So because we started collecting cannabis taxes, I thought it was really important to do some safety and housekeeping. So we got security glass up in the front counter and a real door. We used to just have this little pony gate that just about anybody could probably jump over if they wanted to. And so we put in the front counter glass, we upgraded the camera system, we replaced the gate, we purged a bunch of historical files, and we moved all of our big equipment into one big equipment room. And it made it a lot easier for our employees. COVID hit. Thank God I had the glass up because it made it easier. We didn't have to do a whole lot of retrofitting of anything or buy those plastic things because the glass was already up. We were able to allow customers to keep coming in to pay their taxes. We have a lot of seniors that like to come in and pay and get a receipt. We also were able to provide penalty relief for a lot of our taxpayers who were impacted by the COVID shutdowns. But as I showed you earlier, we've been able to, we maintained our collections. We were really worried that our collections would be impacted by COVID, and they just were not. The people who own homes in El Dorado County, sometimes I wonder how some of them do it, but they do it. Over the last few years, we've added 2 new full-time people and 1 half-time person. We hired a full-time field collector who goes out and meets with mostly businesses that owe unsecured taxes. But it really helps them understand what their responsibilities are. And I really believe in a level playing field for all businesses. You know, it's not fair if you have 2 similar businesses and one's compliant and the other one's not. Our compliance rate is, as you can see by our collections on that previous slide, our compliance rate is really increasing. And so his collections pay for him. The work that he does is paid for by the money that he collects. I was able to add an administrative analyst. Candace is this is Candace Baldwin. She currently is in that position. And a few years back, some of the IT people were moved out into IT. But really, I needed someone who could still help assist and facilitate in some of those things. But I really didn't need 2 full-time IT positions. So Candace, in her position, facilitates a lot of the IT work. And she helps with the cash flow, the daily cash flow that we do. She helps with our property tax bill creation. She's also a lead on our property tax sale, and this is the first one that we're going to be doing. We're going to have one in November. And then I have a half-time fiscal tech who is our backup revenue recovery, because we also do revenue recovery in our department. We've done a lot of software implementations. We did an in-house treasury software to replace a software that we had had for a long time, but it required us to have 11 licenses, and we really only needed 1. So IT and our staff worked to develop a treasury software, and sometimes I think we ought to sell it to other counties. It works really well. It's a win-win. We don't have a regular bill every year for it because our county IT takes care of it. We implemented an HDL system, which does business licenses and TOT certificate and tax collection. And this has given people the ability to practically completely get their business licenses online and pay for them. And then they can get their TOT licenses and their certificates and pay everything online. And I don't know if any of you are part of the fire departments who do the approvals. People don't have to drive all over the county to get their business licenses approved anymore because it's all done electronically, which I think is a fabulous thing. I think it really helps out our business community. And then we implemented Host Compliance, which is a software where we watch who is renting their houses out for short-term rentals. And over the last 2 years, we've collected $400,000 in unpaid TOT for people who aren't in compliance. I think that was probably one of the greatest ones that we did, because I think it more than pays for itself. Some of the projects that we've completed, we are doing payee positive pay. It's a fraud protection, so that when checks go out of the county, there's different things that the bank looks for, and one of them is the payee name. They're working on 2 other accounts right now to get that fully implemented in the county. We implemented point and pay online payments for VHR permits over in the planning department and for elections. And so we're trying to work on getting as many departments on the same point and pay platform for online payments, but there are some that won't ever be able to go because they're the software that they use. A lot of times they're only connected to one credit card company, and they won't allow them to interface with point and pay. But we try. So we've also implemented some scanners for ambulance collection, and we also have one up in Lake Valley Fire Department so that the staff there can actually, they just scan the checks, it creates a file, they push a button, and it goes directly to the bank. So there's no, transferring of checks or anything like that through a courier down to our office so that we can deposit those. So it makes it really quick and easy, and we're looking for more victims. We've updated our fee schedule so that we have full cost recovery. And what was the last one? I missed it. Anyway, we've done a lot. I'm very happy. So this is about the QR codes. Probably about, I don't know, maybe it happened so quickly. Maybe in April, our Megabyte vendor, that's our property tax vendor, called us and said, hey, do you guys want to pilot our QR codes? And we said yes. And it was quite the arduous process because we had such a short period of time to do it in. But I really do have a great staff, and they're willing to try anything and get it done. And so we had to get it into the tax roll, and it took about 6 hours to run the process because this was new. Usually it only takes about an hour and a half, but it took 6 hours because every bill had 3 QR codes on it. One is for the address, so when we get returned mail, we could put a note into the customer's file and send a file over to the assessor's office so that they can work the addresses that need to be updated. Sometimes it's a very daunting process because a lot of people don't forget, they don't update, or they forget to update with the assessor's office, and so sometimes bills just go all over the place. But so it's a success. I'm so proud of it. It was a quick project, but I'm pretty sure it's going to come in handy, especially if there's ever a disaster, like we were worried about the mosquito fire. And we thought, well, this is good because if they can get to, if they have their bills or if they can get to the website, they'll be able to use that QR code to pay their bills. So this year, okay, so in 2020, I had a treasury analyst who retired. And then just recently, my second one retired due to medical conditions. And so I've been focusing, I have had to focus on the treasury just so that we could keep it going. But part of my background is I do have a master's degree in business administration with a finance concentration. So I really love the investment part of my job. And I've really been able to get really involved. So one of the things that we're going to be doing this year is we're going to be implementing a new system called Clearwater Analytics. We currently have a system called Simpro, which has been around for a really long time. And it's a very rudimentary system with a lot of manual inputs. And this system is going to allow us to, what this software will do is this company will connect with our custodial bank. So we have Bank of New York, we have 5 Star, we have River City, we have East West Bank, and then occasionally we add others. But all of these banks are willing to do the interface with Clearwater so that they will just do feeds to keep how much money we've invested with each one of our custodial banks. And then it'll give us reports and analytics so that we can spend more of our time researching investments, negotiating with our brokers, negotiating better rates, negotiating better investment instruments. And I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully, the goal is to have it implemented by December. All the banks are online now, and 2 of them are still in testing, but we're hoping that we can have everything up and running by December. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our investment strategy. So one of the things that we did just probably a few months ago is we updated our investment policy, and we had it certified by the California Municipal Treasurers Association. And I think that one of the reasons why I want to have a good, strong investment policy that can be followed is because of all of the retirements and things that are happening right now. And so the better prepared that we are to move into the future, the better I feel. So we included in that investment policy what I consider also a cash management policy, where departments are going to be required to let me know when they have large capital outlays going out so that I can invest in short-term, like maybe some commercial paper or, a 1-year treasury, depending on what the project is, so that investments mature at the time those expenditures are made. then that way, any of the money that's left over beyond that, I can take and put into longer-term investments so that our money is working for us every single month, maturing every single month. So say, for instance, we have 2 payrolls every month, and then schools has a payroll. We have AP, and then sometimes we have large capital outlay projects. If I can get it to where I have a maturity that's big enough to cover each one of those expenditures, then the rest of the money that's left over, I can invest out and get a better rate. So right now, we're coming into tax season, and so we're going to have a really great opportunity to put this strategy into place. So the interesting thing about the market is when the stock market is kind of falling, so don't look at your 401ks or your deferred comp accounts right now because it's freaking scary. But what happens with the types of investments that government can invest in, bonds, the bond market, the bonds, the interest rate on the bonds goes up. So right now we're seeing investments, interest rates over 4%. Every now and then we get one that they throw at us for a 5%. So what we're hearing is that in November, there's going to be another 75 basis point increase. And so it's like almost like a perfect storm, right? That we're going to be getting all of our property tax money when the interest rates go up again. We've negotiated a 3% rate with all of our banks so that any money that we put into just a liquid bank account where we can pull money in or put money in and pull money out at the drop of a hat. Right now we've negotiated with all of them to get 3%. And if you want to know what it was like a year ago, we were like looking for anything that might even be close to 1%. Our banks were like 0.35%, and they thought they were doing good, and we were just like going, oh. But it looks like this is a good time for us to really take on some, we're going to have some great opportunities. Just the last 2 months of interest, I think, for the general fund is almost as much as we allocated last year for the whole year. So I think we're going to really see some really good interest this year. So these last few slides, this was actually kind of something that Supervisor Hidahl asked for, and so we have put together what is known as the Treasury Dashboard. And so this kind of shows you right now, well, this is actually the end of the fiscal year, June. We haven't completed the quarterly dashboard yet because September just ended. But as you can see, over the last 3 years, our portfolio has went from just a little over 500,000 to a little over 800,000. 800 million, I'm sorry.
Right.
I always do that. I hate that.
0.8 billion. No.
I was like, yeah, I'm hoping that in the next year I'll be able to see $1 billion portfolio. So you guys need to pump the brakes on those expenditures. No, I'm just teasing. And then these are the receipts and disbursements year over year. So as you can see, our receipts are pretty good. And I mean, really, it's fairly similar, but during the COVID time, the expenditures did go down because there was a lot of things that just weren't being done. There was no travel, people were working at home. So probably some of the utility bills and different things like that were just not as high. The other thing is, the Great Resignation. So just our salaries and benefits have probably went down a little bit, even with some of the increases that we've received. The employees have received some increases. But even with that, our expenditures are still fairly even, flat, whatever you want to call it.
I noticed the April versus December versus the April on the revenue side, obviously property tax payment due dates, they're different by a substantial amount. Is that because some people try to pay both of them at the
That
same
is
time?
correct.
Is that what happens?
That is correct.
And they're allowed to do that, right? They're allowed to pay
They
their
are,
second tax
yes.
installment early?
Yes,
That's good. So,
we actually like it. There are a lot of people that do that too,
okay.
which is nice. And it's nice for them too, because then it's done and out of the way. And then they don't have to worry about penalties.
Also got to come to the office and just gonna write a check and be
That's
done
right.
the whole year. Some people are that way. They have to, you know, like you said, they want to get a receipt too, right? They've paid their
Yes.
tax bills and they're done now for the whole year. But
Yep. And the other thing is, for tax, for just your income tax purposes too, right? You just get the whole year all at once. And if you get in the habit of doing that, it makes life a little bit easier,
Yep.
in my opinion. And then this is just like pool participants, so that you can kind of see that schools, the county actually gets the biggest, portion of the pie. And then schools gets about 40, they hold about 42% of the pool. And then there's other like First Five, and I think the Transportation Commission, and they get a little bit of the pool also. And then that is it. Are there any questions?
leadership team, any questions for Karen?
So you'd mentioned that, because we saw the press release for the bid for assets. If you want to talk about that and describe the benefit for the county, because it's a little different way of doing it. You're sort of having almost like a broker, right? For the doing it, it's going to be all online.
It's going to be an online auction.
Okay.
It's something that we used to do at the county office. However, it's a pretty big to-do. It takes a lot of staff time to put that auction on. And then I think doing it online, it'll cast a wider net. So we'll have people coming, or people, coming and looking at our properties from probably everywhere, because Bid for Assets does this auction thing all across the country. Most of the California counties use them to do their tax auctions. We haven't had a tax auction since 2018 because of COVID. And even this year, it's kind of, it's a little depressing, if you have to sell somebody's property because they can't pay their taxes. But we have this great program that we've really been able to let especially people who it's their primary home. It's called Cal FHA, and they will pay up to $20,000 of someone's back taxes. So we've probably had about 6, 8 people who have benefited from this program. A lot more, but from tax sale. So it's going to save their home, which I would hate to ever put anybody out of their home. So thank goodness for this program. I think it's really going to help a lot of people out. It's only for people and their primary residents. So, but we really make an effort to try to help these folks. Sometimes they're just, they need a lot more help. A lot of times they're people who've lost a spouse, or maybe they have some, mental problems and things like that. And we'll call we have Public Guardian. It's a county program, or we'll, ask them to call Senior Legal to see if they can get some help. It's a daunting task, but what happens is we try to get the property into the hands of someone that'll pay the taxes. That's the ultimate goal.
Any other questions? Yeah.
For people who add square footage to, building permit process and stuff like that, I went through that, and, I talked to someone at your office and stuff, but when I read my taxes, I'm not given any kind of assurance that, okay, you guys have accounted for that extra square footage and stuff, so I'm paying the correct taxes. How does that work? I mean, the building department works with you guys and they forward that stuff to you when a building permit is finalized and stuff, or what is that process you guys go through?
So it actually goes to the county assessor's office.
Okay,
They do the reassessment work.
right,
Your bill will be recalculated. The auditor's office actually takes care of the calculation, and once that's done, a bill is generated and we mail it and collect it. But you should be able to, you could do two things. You can look at your previous tax bill. You should have probably received a supplemental tax bill to cover the cost
In interim.
of the building permit. And then you will see the difference in the valuation on your current bill from the previous bill to see what that difference in valuation was for the additional square footage.
ours are impounded as part of our mortgage, so we don't pay too much attention to that.
You are more than welcome to call me personally and I will help you and walk you right through it.
Well, the last thing I want is, okay, I go to sell my house, and then the county realizes, oh my gosh, we never collected all those taxes for the last 10 years for that guest house or whatever I did, you know? So that's my concern, you know?
Well, the assessor does have a few years to be able to work through all of that.
Okay.
But I complain a lot about the time that it takes for them to get that done, and I don't think they like to listen to me. But again, if you want to call me, I will be happy to help you look at your records.
Okay, appreciate it.
Always, does that happen very often where somebody sells their property to find out they've got delinquent taxes they have to pay? Because I've never heard that scenario at all.
I'm
It
talking
just
about me as a
depends.
seller, you know?
It just depends
Oh.
on, for instance, so let's just say he added some square footage on
Right.
and his permit finalized 2 months ago and he sells his house.
2 months, yeah, 2 months time period, I can understand that, but after a year or more, it should
Do
be
you
in there.
want to know what the law says? And
Yeah.
it's really disheartening to me, but I think this is really for big counties that have a lot of property being exchanged for 4 years.
I saw her raise her hand so that means that's all you're legally
But I complain a
entitled
lot.
to collect. If, like, say, if you guys miss it for 15 years, you guys can only collect it for 4 years. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, well, we wouldn't go on beyond 4 years. If we go on beyond 4 years, then it's our error and it's our problem.
Okay,
Bad on us.
maybe I won't call you. No, I'm joking.
What was your name now?
John Davey.
But the assessor's office might be the place to start, was what was my reassessed value?
Right, I gotta look at
Property
that.
add-on, how much did it increase, how much of it's land, how much of it's improvements? Land probably was already there, so it shouldn't be anything on land,
Yeah,
right?
it wouldn't be
So
anything
just
on land. It
improvements?
would just be your square footage increase.
Right.
Or like if you put in a swimming pool and things like that, that'll increase the value of your property. But if you just do like a kitchen remodel or something like that, there's no increase to the property value. I mean,
Yeah.
there is, but we don't assess
Significant.
it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone in the conference room here? Yeah, Tim.
Well, I think everyone here doesn't know, got our tax bill last week, and it was $200 less, so that was a very nice surprise. Tried to figure out why. I went to the CSD candidate forum, and it turns out because of a dispute between the CSD
LLAB.
and Joe Harn on how they collect the landscape and lighting district taxes, Joe Harn apparently decided that you guys could not, or the treasurer cannot collect the LLAD taxes in this year's tax bill. So that will affect everyone in Outdoor Hills by, depending on how many LLAD districts they belong to, anywhere between $25 and a couple $100. So I guess, who makes the decision? Can Joe Harn just tell you guys to delete LLAD taxes that the residents voted for, the residents are depending on because they keep the landscaping going, to keep the water on, and they keep lights on in certain streets. So how does that process work?
So what I think typically happens, and it's not part of my office's responsibility, just so you know, but I believe I can speak to it somewhat intelligently. Every year, special districts school districts, a lot of different people send information to the auditor's office to add direct charges onto the tax bills. And if something was done that didn't follow the proper protocol or procedure to be added onto the tax bill, then because that is the auditor's purview, he can make the decision not to add it onto the tax bill.
That's being challenged, by the way, so.
Yeah, I know, it's being challenging it.
No.
Because again, we all voted to have those taxes, and I think we want them, and
No.
the overall scope of things, a very small amount of the property tax.
For some of them, for newer developments, there's some that are $1,000 or more.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at somebody who's financing a home, $1,000 over 12 months, if it doesn't show up, the carrier reduces the impound account, the escrow account, and then now it's a make good. And so my question to follow up on Tim's was, is there an opportunity for a supplemental property tax assessment if they work this difficulty out, or is that something that's going to catch up next year?
Well, what would probably happen is it would be recalculated and an amount would be added onto the tax bill.
So if it's caught in time, right? We don't know how long this process, the challenge will take, or.
Right.
Okay. I personally was upset with, nobody's said anything about it yet. And we've asked questions and there's been no comment, other than the auditor releasing its letter. So,
There's a certain date in August that every person that wants to have a direct charge, whether it's doing a water bill or metal roof or anything, that has to be turned in before to make it on the tax bill. That time has come and gone.
yeah, his letter was after that even, I
Right,
guess.
it's a date, and then it's presented in the auditor's office who ultimately have the direct charge on the bill.
Yeah.
Just process it, yeah.
It's just that.
So there's a lot of email back and forth, but obviously it's not gone public to my knowledge, other than a few articles
Well,
of paper, which are very general. There doesn't talk about the details typically. It's a complicated issue, let me tell you that.
Yeah, well, I didn't even look at my tax bill, if we're being honest. It was sitting on my desk and my neighbor said, there's no LLD on it. I'm what? And I was like, a week later, I looked at it. That's when I found out.
There is one LOAD,
It's
it's $10.
The roadway
Yeah,
LLD.
that's the only one that everyone pays, but all the others are specific, where you get and how many belong to.
Subdivision, yeah, whatever, yeah.
John, I have a question, kind of a general question. State of California has sent down some guidelines where places like Four Seasons, they may be required, or people can have supplemental apartments or businesses within their homes, okay? And I know Four Seasons, their board is looking at this now to change their rules. If I put a supplemental, let's say, business or apartment within my home, what does that do to my bill, to my tax bill?
Well, it depends on what happens at your home. So if it increases the square footage of the home, if you have to build on some sort of an additional room for an office or something like that, then your secured property tax bill will increase because of that.
There are two ways to do this. You can do it the way you're saying, to build onto the existing property, or I can take a portion, let's say my garage, and now change it into an apartment or into a business. How does that affect my taxes?
My guess is that it probably won't. However, if you actually start a business and you get a business license and you have business property, you will receive an unsecured business property tax bill.
Okay, but if it's not, let's say I'm renting that apartment, I build another apartment and I rent it. Within my garage, let's say I change it to an apartment, would that now change my tax bill?
I really don't think so. I'm not an expert on it, but I don't think so, because if you're not in, but it will change your IRS income tax, because now you're gonna have rental income.
Okay, that's different, you're not taking care
And
of
you're
it.
gonna have to,
Yeah, and it's not
you're gonna
in
have
my
to get a
budget.
building permit for what you're talking about through county planning, and I suspect the assessor will take a look at that, and you maybe get reassessed, but I've never been through that scenario, so.
from the get-go.
So it doesn't matter that you're changing the non-living space, living space in the property.
To
Oh,
us, as the tax collector, it wouldn't, but the building department, it
Right.
absolutely will.
You
So
absolutely
you'll have to do
are
it.
right.
Oh, I know
If it's an
that.
unpermitted
And it'll
facility,
end
you're
up-
gonna get
So we're
notified.
coming
Yes.
for you.
But,
And I was gonna say, it'll end up at our office sending you a. If it increases
We
your
just-
value and you do it.
Yeah, you just don't know. It just depends on how the assessor looks at that improvement. You know, because a lot of times the improvement that they consider is an increase to your square footage. Like if you put in a pool, you're adding value because you're adding this additional thing to your home. Now, it's very possible that if you added a kitchen and a bathroom and you had to hook up another sewer and things like that, then you may find yourself with a different type of a tax bill. But I don't, you know, I'm not sure how that would actually work. So that probably really is a better question for the county assessor.
Thank you. Leadership team, we could come over to a field survey after the meeting tonight.
Come on over anytime.
Refreshments and
You're
everything
invited.
for us.
And we can educate you on accessory dwelling units, which is another way to go, which has its own set of nuances, so.
Feed you for
I
asking
don't think they'll let them
questions.
have them in Four Seasons though.
just, keep my room open.
Leave the light on so he can have some access when he needs it. Is there anybody else who has a question here? Yes.
I certainly do.
Yeah.
Couple questions here. Just on the topic that was discussed and with the engagement of the assessor's office, the auditor's office, and the treasurer's office. Many counties have consolidated all those offices into one elected office. El Dorado County has the largest number of elected offices of almost any of the counties in the state. What would be your view of having a consolidated assessor, auditor, and treasurer's office?
Well, you want my personal opinion?
Your-
I don't think it's a good idea. Let me tell you why. The work that is done in all of those offices is very specialized and different. I know that, I don't know of any county that has all three of those consolidated, but I do know that there are a lot of counties that have departments of finance where they actually have a finance director, and then they have an auditor controller and a treasurer tax collector. But even in some of those, their auditor controller and treasurer tax collector are still elected. So well, this is my personal opinion. I think that when you get all of those things mixed up, then you start convoluting and losing the expertise of the departments the way they are structured now. If you want somebody to be a good, okay, so in my office, you have to be able to deal with people, right?
Well, every office has to deal with people.
Not as many people as we have to
Well,
deal with,
Okay,
okay?
I'll let you
So
say
you
that.
have to have people who enjoy working with people,
I'm sure the assessor feels that way too.
right?
Okay.
No, the auditor doesn't enjoy working with people, no. It's just a different personality that you end up with in the department. So the people who do tax collection, they have a knack for working with people, walking them through processes, and serving and being there for the public. That is probably one of the main things that we do. I think the assessor's office, they do a lot of appraisal work. I'm sure that they have to work with a lot of people, but I think that their main focus is appraisal work. And then when you go over to the auditor's office, their main work is auditing and sending reports to the state. So I think if you try to push them all into one big group of people, that it would be very difficult to manage.
Well, I think many organizations have diverse branches that do different functions.
And that's what we
But-
do.
But the separation by multiple elected officials can also create a silo effect in terms of the quote, protecting my turf because I have to get elected. So I think there are countervailing viewpoints as to the combinations or what have you. I appreciate your perspective. Do you get independently audited,
Yes, sir.
and is that published?
The auditor publishes all of the financial reports. So I'm not sure if the treasury audit is on there or not.
Is that audited by the county auditor or
No.
independent auditor?
Yeah, the outside auditor, the external auditor.
So, can you find out if that's publicly available? I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't be, but,
I can tell you it's publicly available,
Oh,
but
it's-
it may
okay.
not be readily available on a website, right? Because sometimes don't get out there is those kinds of audit reports. But an example you raised, the assessor's office is a required elected position by
Right.
state law. So if you were going to try to consolidate, you'd be electing an assessor, but you would be assigning them multiple duties.
Right.
In the past, Bill Schultz had multiple duties assigned by the county that he was agreeable to. And when he retired, we broke that out and made it a separate department. So, and this is the voters registrar of voters office. We decided not to try to leave those together because being recorder clerk and registrar of voters was a little bit of a challenge, I think, to look at the independents and how they would function. But there's individual decisions that, people look at it and say, unfortunately, go one way or go the other direction. Unfortunately, in my experience, it's personality based, who is in that actual position. Because you could have an elected assessor who's really good at, basically managing a large organization and getting the right people on staff and those kinds of things. But typically, those are hard to find, somebody you can elect that has that breadth of experience. So it's a plus and minuses type thing, but it's certainly worth looking into from a charter perspective.
this is one of the things that the charter review has been tasked to take a look at, and the pros and the cons, or I should say the cons and the pros, need to be able to be articulated, so a recommendation, good or bad, can be, sent to the supervisors.
Well, you're correct about the first battle, but my years just moving into the building season. That's stuff, building plan, the county's made efforts, building and planning. How they do that, and then even transportation. Changes to have them on to supervisor, CEO's office. And so the county's done a lot better job in respect to getting that accountability and getting that hierarchy in place. So you can minimize those, natural truth battles.
And in the future, what factors do you think voters should look at relative to selecting and electing the treasurer candidate? What factors in your operation?
Well, you certainly want somebody who is qualified, somebody who understands accounting, somebody that understands collecting money from people, and somebody who understands how to do commercial banking, and how to invest money.
Okay, but I presume you have individuals within your department who are specialists in those different areas?
Sure,
But you do need to have a knowledge overall.
absolutely. If I didn't know what they were doing, how could I know what they were doing?
So basically, you're saying the fundamental credentials of the treasurer candidate should be very, very important thing.
And I believe the law requires either a bachelor's degree in some sort of accounting or finance with so many courses in certain things. You have to have so many years of executive experience managing financial departments, or a CPA license. And then you have to do continuing education also. So every year you have to do so many hours of continuing education.
You mentioned tax collections were at a very high level, but what is our percentage of property tax defaults in a year?
Percentage of people who don't pay?
Yeah,
Well, if
or the
we,
amount. I'm really more focused on the amount. that's
well, I
not paid.
think in the presentation, it said we were charged to collect 444 million in the year, and we collected 4443.
So $1 million would be the difference that they weren't able to collect, and that's last year's cycle.
Now, do you know over time if that amount or that percentage has fluctuated, or do you have those kinds of records?
You know, it's pretty steady, the percentage that we collect. So, and then and that's why we do the tax sale, right? So every year, not only do we send out tax bills, but to everybody who is late, we send out notices so that they will pay their taxes. And if they don't pay their taxes after 5 to 6 years, we put their property up for tax sale.
You mentioned this online or auction that was occurring. How many properties are eligible from El Dorado County to get into that mix this year?
You know how many?
Just over, so my last count was 320.
And that's out of 120,000 parcels or thereabout?
And a lot of those are bare land parcels, and a lot of them are timeshares up in Tahoe.
Majority of them are, at the start, we had 102 real property. 20 of those having homes on it, and I believe we're down to 14 homes left, and then the remainder being bare land. Of those, we're down to 5 maybe still on the tax sale. It's changing very rapidly right now because we're getting closer to this.
I think you're gonna find a little more of that with Grizzly Flat, because to be honest, people are leaving the state, and why are they gonna wanna pay taxes if they've left the state? They still own the property, they still should be paying taxes. But how do you compel them to do that? And ultimately, it may end up being part of an auction, raw land now that's been burned down, and where does that end up? It's an unfortunate set of circumstances, but there's a lot of mix of different things as to why those properties end up on that auction list.
Increase in the interest rate.
Yes,
Could be a longer-term impact.
Well, and not only that, just the cost of materials, right? Gasoline,
How
I
many
mean-
employees in your department?
20.5,
That's
20
all?
and a half. Yes, sir, we're small but mighty.
Now, my
She only works
last question is a question, but I'll also say it's a pet peeve. Why is the treasurer's name asked to be put on our checks that we write to the treasurer?
It's the law.
It is?
But you don't have, yes, it is. If you want to send me an email, I'll shoot you the law. It is. It's an old law, but it is the law. But you can write it to
Well,
the treasurer tax
I don't put
collector.
your name.
Yeah.
No offense, and I didn't put Sherry's name on it either.
That's fine.
But it is a state law that says to
It
do
is,
that.
sir, yes.
Is the treasurer's bank account in your name?
No, it's in the El Dorado County's name, but it is, I am the signer, the main signer on the account.
Okay, thank you.
And just so that you know, the reason why I use K.E. Coleman is because that is not the name I use in my personal life. So there's a distinct difference.
Thank you.
any other, yeah, Tim?
I want to let you know that part of the week meeting is Monday, next Monday, a week today. And one of the things on the agenda is to discuss the combination of various elected offices. So you and your counterparts might want to attend that meeting because we want to hear what public has to say, but we also want to hear what the elected officers have to say. It's a very good reason why you don't think it's appropriate to have. I'd like to hope your other positions also feel good. One of the things we're also going to be looking at, not on Monday, but later on, auditor, DA, sheriff also not have the same type of term limit? But right now, there are no term limits. Your predecessor, I think, served 30-plus years. And I'm just wondering, shouldn't we be consistent? We have term limits for some offices, should we have term limits for the others as well?
So my understanding is that this is not just in our county, right? Other counties have the same rules. So my understanding is that this is a statewide consideration. I believe that the work that's done by the board is significantly different than the work that is done by the treasurer, tax collector, the auditor, controller, the assessor, the recorder clerk, the surveyor, the sheriff, the DA. And I really believe that the board is making policy decisions that are just really in tune to what's happening in each of their districts. And that the constituents in each of those districts gets to say, this is what we want, and this is what we want you to get for us. And if that supervisor doesn't fulfill whatever their constituents want, then you have the opportunity to vote in somebody else. The elected officials that are doing the treasury, the auditor, the assessor, the sheriff, and the DA, what we're doing is we're following Gov Code, governmental code. We're required to follow different codes in different offices to ensure that the constituents that we serve are getting the best services under the law that we can provide. And in my opinion, now, I don't know, I don't really want to speak to any of the other offices because I've really never done the work in those offices. But my concern would be that if you have a revolving door of auditor, controllers, treasurer, tax collectors, and assessors, sheriffs and DAs, you are going to lose the continuity that is required to keep those offices in good shape. If you don't care if your property taxes are collected so that you have money to provide adequate services throughout the county, I say go ahead and change the terms. If you don't care if the money that goes out isn't audited, that your vendors' contracts aren't being reviewed when a payment goes out, then change the term limits. Or even the property tax. I mean, there's a component in the auditor's office that's totally, the staff over there takes care of all of the calculations and all of the direct charges. And in my opinion, so let's talk about what happened in building and planning, DOT, and environmental management, because I worked over there as the CFO, and I will tell you, the leadership over there suffered because of the pulling together and pulling apart, putting together and pulling apart. And that leadership suffered, and the staff suffered, and everybody's afraid to make a decision. And I'm sorry, but it is hard for them to get anything done over there. If that's the way you want the whole county to work, then I say, go for it. Change it all. And you'll be suffering too. Because
Are you saying that? It just becomes a new person comes in who's qualified competitively, that things automatically fall apart?
is that what I said?
Sounded like you said if you don't have
If you
continuity,
have-
you will have all these failures.
Well,
Then is that what you said?
that's been my experience.
I think, we've had some pretty good leadership from the CAO's office for a while with Don Ashton. And I lived through all that stuff. I went to those meetings. Do this differently. We're going to do that differently. So I agree with you from that standpoint. That, it's just, you get someone else in leadership and they want to go a different direction. And instead of working with what you've got and building on that, it was very frustrating and very challenging. And I like some of the leadership that we have now in the various department heads, and, but there's always room for improvement. And it goes for even if it's an elected position or not. So there's always room for improvement. And I think the concern is when you have someone established in there for many, many, many years, there's lots of talented people out there. And unfortunately, in our political climate, with the way politics go and all the negative, I heard it today from a consultant, about going negative, during campaigns and stuff like that. I think a lot of people believe the incumbents have a significant advantage. Now, that's not anything against you or any other incumbents, but that's just the reality of it. And so I've said for years, and not necessarily with your positions, but with other elected positions, term limits are kind of a necessary evil, unfortunately, because a lot of, like I look at Congress and people, my gosh, a lot of these congressmen and Senate and they're 80 plus years old. And it's like, but they got that name recognition. And boy, it's really hard to, quite frankly, get them out because they have that. So, for whatever it's worth. So, but thank you.
But if they aren't doing their job, they're probably going to get voted out.
Money talks a lot, so at that level, I mean, that's a
You know,
totally different dimension.
I would, just, some insight is that, at a county level, it's very local, much more so than at a congressional level. Or the state assembly. Our board of supervisors are both legislative and an executive function, whereas, as you spoke to, most of the other elected offices operating according to government code. You don't like the changes that are made at the county in terms of, most of those changes are at the board of supervisors. So, or, the CAO's office might provide some input, but in your individual elected entities, it's a little different. It's not a direct impact of something changing that impacts a resident as much as, say, the legislative function.
So I just want to say this. I think that when people have the ability to vote for their elected officials, that government works better. I think if everything is funneled through a group of people or one person, the people, lose their power. And I strongly believe in having elected officials. Who, I don't know, I can't speak for all of them, but you know what? I want to do a good job. I live in El Dorado County too. I want to make sure that our people are taken care of and I'm doing my job according to the law. And I actually do my best to stay in my lane.
Final questions. We got to kind of wrap it up here, but anybody else here present in the room? I'm not seeing anybody on Zoom unless you've seen a hand go up and down. So again, thank you, Karen. Very,
Thank
very
you.
insightful discussion. Appreciate all that. And I will say one thing. Karen is one of those individuals in the county that's most responsive to asking for metrics. A lot of people who live in the so-called silos of elected, they don't want to give you anything that's measurable to put out in a transparent format so people can really start to say, are they delivering the service I'm paying for? Karen does that very well, and I think we're continuing to have those discussions. Things like dashboards, I think, are the way you make improvements with that. I'm not sure her predecessor would have ever accepted any of those things. So changeover in some of the philosophies and knowledge of technology and some of those things help you get advanced in an organization. But yeah, so again, thank you very much. And Candace, thank you for attending as well. Appreciate that. Pleasure to meet you.
So we did bring a few pages of the Treasury Tax Board, and we also brought
Okay.
a handout about how to avoid penalties.
There you go.
And I brought a card.
Pay on time, is that? That's great, yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, thank you.
We'll get them passed around. Thank you. Yeah.
Pass them around.
Yeah, you can pass them around. That's fine. We can go ahead and move on while you're doing that.
Okay.
Okay, so supervisor communications, this is going to go pretty quick, I think. Again, nothing new on Central that we've heard coming back to the board. Nothing new on Costco. I do know there's discussions on both going on, but nothing new that we can present as finite changes. The board did take action on establishing a temporary, and by that 12 to 18 months, homeless shelter. It's been approved at the former Placerville Juvenile Hall, which is right within the campus, across the street from the old sheriff's facility and just down the road from where the Board of Supervisors offices are located. The planned opening of that is mid to late January, so we're pushing to try to get that going the first part of the year. There's also discussions about a more permanent site. That's not been decided yet, but we did authorize the planning to look at building a homeless shelter and navigation center on the old sheriff's site, because it's been cleared. They went through and removed all the buildings and everything else at that location. So it's ready to go if that's what the board decides. So a lot of activity relative to providing a shelter and navigation center for the homeless. The county has retained a recruiter to expand our efforts to seek candidates for the CAO's position. A lot of you know that our CAO has submitted, he's notified us that he will be retiring in the March timeframe. This is target, early March. And so we've opened up a recruitment process. We started originally just trying to do it within our HR organization. We had 3 qualified candidates that were recommended for interviews, went through 4 different panels of county employees and outside sources. Some of the commission members got to participate in some of these. From that, the determination was made that we really need to look a little bit further for a position like the CAO. I mean, he runs the whole county operations. And so it's like taking a CEO of a major corporation and stuff. You got to have a lot of skills. You got to have a lot of experience. And unfortunately, in the recruitment process, you pretty much have to know California state law, which is unique to every other state. And we have things like CEQA that if you go to Texas and talk to them, they kind of give you a blank stare, like, what the hell are you talking about, right? What, a permit? So the CAO recruitment got to the point we said we need to have a broader reach. So we have hired a recruitment firm. They've already sent out notifications. I think the advantage from my perspective is we're probably going to get more interest from city managers in the state of California who might be interested in stepping up to a CAO's position. There's 11 other counties that are seeking CAOs at the same time. So there's been a big turnover, and that recruitment cycle is very difficult because there's a select number of people that are really well qualified for those positions. So we also made a small increment in the salary range to accommodate trying to attract a few more people. Not a significant amount. We went up 5% on the range at both the bottom and the top end to see if we get a little bit different response just due to that. But it's a very demanding role, and so we're waiting to hear back. And so we're hoping to finish that recruitment cycle no later than February. But it's just no way to tell until you've seen how many people actually apply, and the panelist process, we're going to continue to use that. So I think at the end of that process, we're going to say we have the most qualified person who's willing to come to work in El Dorado County. Is that good enough, or do we continue the search? Because there's been some counties that have been looking for 2 years for their CAO. And so it isn't an easy thing to find that right person that will come to your county and take on that kind of a role. And I think COVID has changed a lot of that. There was a lot of the CAOs and CEOs of counties who decided they were going to retire just because of all the stress COVID laid on the top of them. All these things with restricted public meetings, all the criticism from the public, the concerns with wearing masks, the concerns with the kids couldn't be in school, all of those things came down to the county level. And unfortunately, a lot of people thought the CAO and other county personnel were responsible for that, including the Board of Supervisors. And so it's a hard position to take when there's that much turmoil within the community, divisiveness within the community. So Don has announced his retirement. We will find a replacement. The good news is we've got an acknowledgement that our deputy CAO will take on the role on an interim basis, but none of us want to make that very long if we have to do that. So, I mean, the sooner you get the right person in the job that is willing to step up and take that on, the better off we're going to be. Yeah. Yeah. So we're not going to be without somebody who's willing to take it on for short term. But again, interim doesn't mean you do it for 1 or 2 years, right? You got to get the replacement going is my opinion. So I also want to mention that today, our new Director of Health and Human Services, Evelyn Schaefer, started. So that's another major transition. That is the biggest department in terms of total number of employees in the county. And it's one of these organizations that we've always talked about, should we split it up to make it a little bit more direct in terms of how the services are operated, or is it better to have this umbrella? So Karen and I could have a long conversation about pluses and minuses with Health and Human Services, because a reorg has been proposed. But I'm not sure Evelyn likes it or is going to go forward, but it was my pleasure and Cindy's to meet with Evelyn today. She made it a point to get on our calendar and say hello and start that conversation. I will be meeting with her monthly. So I'm pleased with that, because I think getting to know El Dorado County and some of the characters that play roles in El Dorado County is important. And so, but she seems very well suited for the job right now, and I got nothing to say but positive things, and hopefully she will settle into that position and start, making the changes she thinks are necessary, because that's one of the first things that you have to assess is where are we and what can we do better, and how do we define those things that are really priority and then go after them. So I think that was a great acquisition. We'll see how all that works out. The last thing I had here is the hemp pilot program. They're off gathering data on the concerns of growing hemp within El Dorado County. We are moving forward with that, but it has to come back to the board from some additional decisions to be made. I think the board in general says it's another agricultural product. If we run the pilot program, which is proposed, there's a very limited number of people who will be in that pilot program. I think we've said the maximum is 7. And most of them, I think we probably know 80% of them, because they're people who participated in the initial hemp growing in El Dorado County before there was any ordinance, and then that had to be changed. But so we're still on that path. I'm not sure where it's going to end, but stay tuned.
Coming to the planning commission next week.
Which part? Okay, for the review of the proposed pilot program. Okay, all right. Okay, that's good to know. Because we had 2 groups that were very active in doing that. CDAC worked a lot on it, and our ag commissions membership, ag commissioners and stuff worked very hard on it. They collaborated and came forward with letters of recommendation to the board. And so there's a divisive nature to that too. A lot of the people in law enforcement would rather see nothing that's of a cannabis type in El Dorado County, ban everything. But from the ag perspective, it does provide another opportunity for a crop that we don't have right now. And what I'm hearing is some of the apple orchards in El Dorado County having to be pulled out. Have you heard that yet? But there's one in particular, evidently they've got an issue with a disease. So they're going to have to plant something other than apples. And once it gets started in one place, how quickly does it spread to other places? We had the pear blight many, many years ago. It warped out the pear orchards and they became apples. And now it seems like there's a similar thing. I'm not saying it's the same, but there's something similar going on in some areas. And I've read the same thing in Napa. There's areas where they're growing grapes over there that they have to shut down the grape growing because there's things happening with the grape production process that they don't want spread anywhere. So
Specifically, that meeting's going to be on October 13th.
okay,
Go on and pull down the agenda.
October 13th. We start at 8:30. We start at 8:30. Right. So, but is it a time? It probably isn't a time allocated.
It's the only item, right?
The only item?
Well, it's not. We have a cannabis item.
Okay.
that's
So
right.
all right. So
Well-
people just have to.
Well, it's not a grower. It's a dispensary.
Another one in Cameron Park.
I didn't want to get into specifics.
sorry,
We
go
got a
ahead.
closed session item concerning that.
Okay.
But everybody knows you.
Right.
Okay, so that's all I had in my communication. Any questions? Yes. Yes. Yes, so we have finished the recruitment for a new LAFCO executive officer. That actually took about a year, much longer than we thought. But former Supervisor Shiva Frenson has been appointed that position. We've tried to get it out in various news media and put it out in social media and stuff. But I'm very pleased with the selection personally, and Tim is on LAFCO, and so he played a role in that as well. Because Shiva has a love for El Dorado County. She has a love for what LAFCO does, and I don't understand why, because LAFCO's role is kind of a funny role when you really understand what they do and what they have to put up with. But I think we're going to see some significant strategic changes at LAFCO through our strategic ad hoc committee that is going to form a much better set of policies and a much better procedural process that we can control internally compared to what we've had in the past. So looking forward to that. One of the things on the horizon is the fire summits. We did a MSR, service review, municipal service review for all the fire districts in El Dorado County. From that, there was a recommendation made by the consultant that we hold separate fire summits on the west slope and in the Tahoe Basin. LAFCO has agreed to do that, and the whole emphasis is looking at how we deliver better services and keep the cost down, and in particular, when you look at some of the more rural districts that are struggling just to survive, what do we do to make sure that their survival is a positive thing? So we started out with an initial discussion. Chief Lilly was involved with that. It's a planning type of discussion, but that will be ultimately scheduled as a fire summit, open to the public, to really take all the inputs and see what we can come up with. And it's kind of two major areas. One is the emergency medical system, which is a JPA in the county, and the fire chiefs and stuff. The fire chiefs are the administrators for it. The county is responsible for it. And then the other is the fire service itself. And we have 2 CSAs, county service areas. County service area 7 serves this part, the west slope. There's funding collected on the property taxes. Thank you very much. And those are used for various things to meet the needs of the service area. There's also service area 3, I should mention, the Tahoe Basin, but that collection is much smaller because of a much smaller geographical area. But there's things the county could do to consider more expenditures from those funds back to the districts. The other thing we've been doing recently is with TOT tax, finding impacts from tourism and directing some of those funds to the fire districts. And then there's Prop 172, which is also out there, that is subject to discussion of what the taxpayers' intent was when they voted on it versus how it got administered within El Dorado County. That's my purview of it. But there'll be more discussion. I think the Charter Committee will, at some point may touch on that, may not. But yeah, right. So you're always welcome to those public meetings. If anybody'd like to sit on a LAFCO meeting, we hardly have anybody attend. So we're currently doing municipal service reviews for a couple different areas. The next one we're going to be doing is the city. So the city of South Lake Tahoe, the city of Placerville, and the Cameron Park CSD are going to be done as a group. That ought to be an interesting one because now you really get into the politics of very organized infrastructure and individuals, and so we'll see how that goes, but I think it'll be good. We always have an ad hoc committee, has been our recent practice, assigned to work with that, so 3 members of the LAFCO Commission work with the consultant and with our staff to try to make sure all the data is right, get through all that stuff, and then you make a presentation. And so in this case, we have a representative from the city of South Lake Tahoe, a representative from the city of Placerville is going to be on the ad hoc committee. And then our at-large member who lives very close to the Cameron Park CSD and is familiar with what their operations are is going to be the 3rd member. So I think we're really starting to get more direct involvement in the MSR process and then trying to make it transparent and put it out to the public. You're going to see some significant website improvements when we're all said and done, but just getting it started. So yeah, thank you for that. That announcement has gone out, but it doesn't hurt to reinforce that. So. Don't know yet. Yeah. A lot of people don't even know what LAFCO stands for, so you can spend a lot of time talking about that too. Okay, I'm done with that. So with that, let's go on to leadership team progress reports. We always start with public safety. And I do believe Detective Andrew Garola, is that the way you pronounce his last name? Is here. And so let's start with that. Detective, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're doing great, Andrew. Go ahead and just share your report with us if you would.
Great, thanks. So I am Detective Andrew Garola, El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. I'm a detective for property crimes, primarily El Dorado Hills area, all the way up to about Bass Lake and sometimes into Cameron Park, Cambridge area. We've been busy over the last month and a half, kind of all hands on deck for a burglary that took place at the Hills Church earlier in August. Our time has been kind of split up between that and mosquito fire. Pleased that we were able to make 2 arrests in that case. We were able to get a bunch of stolen property back. Additionally, with one of our suspects, we learned he was part of a burglary that occurred over at eLife Cycles in the El Dorado Hills Business Park. So that's been good. And there's actually still further investigation going on there because I believe that he's probably involved in more thefts that occurred in the area. We're tracking stats closely. I'm actually having a meeting with our property crimes detectives, our crime analysts, and Lieutenant Lykoff tomorrow to discuss some of the El Dorado Hills Business Park stuff. And then we will be presenting for the El Dorado Hills Chamber of Commerce on Wednesday. Aside from that, we have a little bit of an uptick in catalytic converter thefts. I think we should be putting out some social media regarding that here shortly. And then, you know, anything that comes up, we're trying to deal with. But the Hills burglary was a high dollar amount taken from there. A little sophistication on their part of the criminals. So we actually arrested one suspect twice on that one. He was initially booked in the Sacramento County Jail because we arrested him down in Sacramento County. His second time around, he was booked up here in El Dorado County. He spent more time than he would have down in Sac. I think he finally bailed out today. But you know, we're still working that. We're looking at a good case on that one. Once we get more details, release it. I think we put some stuff on Facebook. Aside from that, not anything much more to report unless you guys have any questions.
Questions from anybody on the leadership team? Being none, anyone in the audience present have a question for our detective? All right, and I'm seeing no hands raised. So, hey, I want to thank you, Andrew, for supporting us this evening and giving your summary of where you are with things. Everybody's always interested in crime and what's going on in our local community. And so thanks for the heads up on the Hills Church. I had heard about that, but I didn't understand that you know, there was already suspects that had been apprehended, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a good thing to know that somehow we are tracking these people down and they're subject to the justice system, wherever that is today, knowing there's a lot of variability in it. But again, thank you for your attendance and support, and we really appreciate it. So
No problem. I look forward to seeing you guys soon again next month.
excellent. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Hey, okay. And CHP, do we have Officer Brown? I'm guessing I don't see him anywhere. So we'll pass over to CHP and we'll go to our local fire.
Yes, well, thank you. Again, Michael Lilienthal, Deputy Chief with El Dorado Hills Fire. And first, good job to El Dorado County Sheriff's Department on their engagement down there with those burglaries. I know that's a big deal for the community, and some friends that I know that own one of those shops were pleased to have the response that they got.
Yeah.
So compliments to them. Well, the mosquito fire was a big incident for El Dorado County, and so fortunately we had a weather change which really reduced that fire down to being not as threatening. It currently stands just under 77,000 acres. It's 90% contained, although there's still 1,500 firefighters out there working, doing a lot of repair of the damage we do when we fight the fire. They call that suppression repair. So a lot of that activity going on. It is the biggest fire in the state, at least for this year, at 77,000 acres. So not too bad, really, all things considered. But we had almost 4,000 firefighters committed to that fire at its peak. So really big operation. EDH fire, we were very active in that incident. We sent a total of 14 firefighters there at various stages, from incident management team participation, which I went the night it started. It was about 800 acres, along with one of our captains as part of a regional incident management team. And we had the initial management of that incident for a couple days, really a rapidly expanding incident very quickly. We also sent other members on engines. And then when the fire jumped into El Dorado County that day, it made a very aggressive run. We pulled engines out of the stations, 911 coverage engines, and immediately deployed a total of 12 engines and chief officers. Chief Johnson went, our fire chief as well, as part of that. Really made a great effort to protect that community up there. So real proud of our folks. They did a great job. And that was a bad fire, could have been a lot worse. And so we're real grateful for the status that it's in right now today. So kind of a big incident for us. But everybody is home now, all your El Dorado Hills firefighters. And I always like to talk about, even when we deploy people out, we still protect our home here. We always backfill firefighters. We bring them in. Folks from home come in and protect the stations in the community. So we don't reduce service here in the community for very long when we do that. So the other great thing, and thanks to Supervisor Hidahl really for a lot of support recently, and I heard TOT funds. We appreciate you collecting those. The El Dorado Hills community will be the benefit of some of those funds in the form of a lake boat. So currently we're well equipped to handle swiftwater type rescues on the American River with a very small boat that's meant for really the dynamic, fast moving water. But thanks to the board and the TOT funding, we will be purchasing a lake boat, or we're in that process now. Really dynamic type boat for us, because the static water, the non-moving water of Folsom Lake, you really need a powerful engine to get out quickly to really make an impact when there's an emergency. We've had about 80 incidents out on Folsom Lake in the last 5 or 6 years, ranging from all kinds of stuff, boats that are catching fire. We've had burn victims, drownings. We have mountain bike riders that crash on the trails, and we use the water as the best way to move them to an ambulance. So really a great resource for our community. And it'll also be equipped to fight fire. So it'll be able to pull up to the shore, let's say of Lake Hills, drop the front of it down, and firefighters will get off with hose, and it will have a pump, and it's sitting in the water. So it has an endless water supply. So really just an amazing resource. It'll be of great benefit. And since it's sitting on a trailer, we always like to call out, as we did to the Board of Supervisors, that it's available for anywhere in the county. If the incident's anywhere in any body of water, we will deploy, just like we did Volcanoville, we will deploy that boat anywhere in the county and serve anybody in the county with their needs. So really great. Supervisor Hidahl was instrumental in getting that and advocating for our department. We really appreciated that. Great victory there. And then I can't believe it's already October, 3rd. And so I wanted to remind everybody here in about 60, 70 days, we'll be looking at our Santa run again. So more information to follow, but it's hard to believe that it's that time of year already, but it really is. And we're excited for that event to be coming up. And then lastly, another great thing that's been going on in the business park, and we report out monthly, is our training center. If you're down in the business park near Station 87, you'll see a lot of construction going on a really a state-of-the-art training center that will benefit our department, the other fire departments in our county as far as joint training that we'll be able to do. Just a state-of-the-art, amazing facility. And I would point out that Supervisor Hidahl on our fire board was part of that vision years ago, and now Director White and the other directors and the fire chief are really putting together an amazing project. So really great thing for us. We're excited about it. And that is the end of the fire report.
Question. Do you do any educational outreach, like free rides on the boat? Give me a call.
We'll connect with you.
Also, I think most of us saw on TV live that riveting moment during the mosquito fire when it was approaching the ridge top at the high school. And I was on hand crew for a couple of years, way back when. And I was surprised that I saw tall timber right by the school, right by the roads. And do you have any insight that you can share without really being critical? But, why weren't a lot of those trees taken down in anticipation, or were they just caught flat-footed? Because I was really surprised that was in that condition with that fire racing uphill like that.
Right. Well, I don't know if anyone saw last night on 60 Minutes, there was a pretty interesting story on Grizzly Flats and what happened up there. But one of the main topics of discussion in the fire service at the leadership level, statewide and I would say nationally, comes down to management of the forest, cutting the trees down and thinning them back and giving that defensible space. So that scale of a problem in our forest is a gigantic issue to tackle. Certainly one that will be talked about by the leaders and actions being taken for many years as we do try and deal with that, and really will take a lot of cooperation from the Forest Service
Well,
and
I meant from an
others.
emergency standpoint, not a long-term planning standpoint, that you see that fire coming up the hill and it's projected to come up there, to make those emergency decisions. Hey, let's clear out some of this tall timber to, minimize spread. So
The ability to do it in the moment, if that's what you're saying, and respond quick enough to start cutting down those big trees just isn't a feasible.
Cut them down, but you can't get them out of there very quick, right? So that's the
Kind
other
of the
part.
dead and down. Yeah, I mean, crews on these fires, when they're planning on what to do as far as actively fighting the fire, they have crews way out ahead of the fire when their predicted path of travel, doing just that mitigation activities where they can. There was a sequoia grove that was threatened, and there was a lot of resources out there, mostly on the Placer County side there, but out there doing mitigations around the big trees. And they will look at opportunities to prep structures ahead of the fire, schools, residences, and all that. So there is a lot of that goes on. But the feasibility of cutting big trees down in high enough volume to create that break in time is a taller
saw
order.
lots of vehicles that were right there. And it all went up,
It went fast that day when it traveled, just explosive growth. Really impressive, not in a good way.
I did get an update today from the Director of Environmental Management about the number of homes lost. And evidently on the El Dorado County side, there were really only 12 homes lost in the mosquito fire. There were other structures, outbuilding, garages, barns, whatever, but only 12 homes. So that's the good news, that it wasn't a large number. Obviously, Grizzly Flats was several hundred. And then when you include the Forest Service cabins and everything else, it was, I think, a total of 600 or something, everything lumped together. So significantly different magnitude, but we're facing the same kind of situations in terms of what do you do for cleanup? Is the state going to assist with the cleanup? And, you know, all those kinds of things that we have to go through. So that effort continues, and I don't think the public recognizes how much extra work it is for county staff to have to go and address these kinds of emergency disaster situations and try to get things under control. So building permits and a lot of other things got affected by it, but, you know, I think overall we did the right things for the right reasons. And, you know, it's always unfortunate when you can't get individual assistance because we don't know yet of those 12 homes, how many of them might have been insured and not, because insurance is a big deal, but we all know that the state's program is not necessarily an affordable program for a lot of people. So, yeah, the FAIR program isn't so fair, right? FAIR, yeah, right. So that's a continuing struggle, but.
And I would just call it, I mean, one other great thing that's going on with the El Dorado Hills Fire Department in partnership with the county is that we're doing defensible space inspections in partnership with the county, not just in El Dorado Hills, although we are absolutely doing our community, but all across the county, really trying to reduce risk to homeowners. It's been a great joint venture. It's taken a lot of resources from both sides to make it happen, but it's been a very successful program at helping reduce risk. We need everybody individually as a homeowner to do their part too, and clear around your house and make those efforts. And I think it's going to take everybody working together across the state, from the federal level down to the individual homeowner, to even make a dent in the problem.
Several years, it is going to happen quickly. Thank you for sending out the vegetation management notice again. They came over with your tax bills, if you didn't notice it. And I think that's just a good reminder that, hey, you know, now's the time to start thinking about next year already and getting the stuff cleaned up and see if you can't have some additional defensible space or whatever you're working on, defensible home site before the next fire season starts, because that's probably going to be April, May, June, wherever it is in there. We're not through this one yet, but people need to start planning because it does take financial resources to do those things, and they're not inexpensive. So. We need another big rainstorm, and we might be able to open something up. But. Any questions for Chief Lilly? Not seeing any more in the room.
I got one.
Okay.
No, it takes a long time for John. So the department did the CERT training program. It was kind of, was it right around COVID, right? Kind of intertwined, if I'm remembering, right? The local CERT, the training.
Our local CERT program.
So is there another session coming, or is there something that maybe in the future?
Yeah, I know that they are reinvigorating that program. We have a new fire marshal, you met, Field, just an amazing asset for us. She's getting a lot of things back on track for us. But one of the efforts that she is focused on is a CERT program with the chief. That's been his vision from the start, is really expanding that program and then hoping to utilize the CERT members more and more. We have been using them, but to increase the size and then to increase the participation level. So, which I would say is a CERT program is a citizen volunteer that helps the fire department. It really expands our bandwidth, and it's a fantastic resource. It's almost like a community volunteer, but they have extra training, so it's not just a basic volunteer. And
Kind of the parallel to the Sheriff STARS program, right?
yeah, in a way, they have a CERT program as well. It's a little more focused on emergency response teams. It's a citizens emergency response team, and really new in the last few years here in El Dorado Hills specifically. So, but definitely getting off the ground, definitely in the right direction, and a great tool for us to expand our reach of our effectiveness.
Awesome. Very good. Any other final questions for Chief Lilly? I'm not seeing anybody online either. So let's just come around the table this way. So Richard, if you want to cover good governance for us.
The Charter Review Committee is underway, and it is a required activity of the county initiated by the Board of Supervisors every 4 years. And this current committee has received some requests from the supervisors to look at some of the items. As Mr. White had indicated, there are several on our agenda. And what we're attempting to do is to reach out to the various entities that can be impacted to solicit their ideas and information so we can make some quality factual assessments of some of these topics. Our upcoming meeting is October 10th at 5 p.m. at the Board of Supervisors office in Placerville. On our current agenda, we are looking at several items that will come up for general discussions at the meeting. We're not taking action, but we're still trying to gather input. Number one item on our agenda list will be staggered terms for elected department heads, to move all of the elected department heads out of the same election year so that there is a transition in state government that is not all at once. Now, the governor just signed a bill, AB 759, that makes the sheriff and the DA a 6-year term. This
One time
election
only.
takes them to 2028 election that they will be in office. And those two offices will come up for election during the presidential years. And that's why apparently it was felt to be needed to be changed at the big house down in Sacramento. So after the election cycle in November, those two elected officials will be in office for 6 years, but only for these first 6 years. So it does suggest a way of how to create staggered terms, in that we could create a 6-year cycle for one of the elected or two of the elected officials. And so they would then be in a different election period, if that's a good idea.
You're gonna get 2 of the 7 by the state law, right? So
Right, yeah. So we can't do
I don't
anything
know if you
about
want to do
that.
anything more than that.
However, there was a little caveat in the state law that said if a charter county had in their charter the election dates of those two officials, those would remain. Apparently, there had been a threatened lawsuit as to constitutionality of impacting the Constitution, so the law included that little caveat. Our charter does not have the DA or the sheriff election cycle in it. So a second item on our agenda will be possibly the consolidation of some elected department heads. It's the issue I kind of raised to get ideas and thoughts here tonight. And we're soliciting input on the pros and the cons. There may be no quality benefits. There may be some fiscal benefits in how offices are run and people are hired, and multiplicity of jobs that get done that might be similar. So pros and cons. There was a suggestion that we also look at adding an additional third term in office for a board of supervisors, because we have heard repeatedly we don't get the clout within the state governmental structures when our supervisors turn over on short terms. Also, there is a real benefit as to when does a supervisor really learn the job. And as you pointed out, if a person's doing a good job, he'll get reelected. If he's not doing a good job, he probably won't stay there very long. But it's a very critical role because it's both administrative and legislative. So it's very significant, executive and legislative. So it's a very critical position in the county. And an 8-year limitation may not be the kind of development of experience and competency that would best benefit the county. So that's one of the things we're looking at. We were also asked to take a look at whether, because of the nature and size of our county, relative to the population allocation, whether the Board of Supervisors might be increased to 7. A very limited survey, a very complete survey shows there's only one county in the state, which is San Francisco.
San Francisco County
that has
and city.
7, and they don't really call their people supervisors. So, but we'll take input on that. But we're also soliciting other ideas and that might be considered relative to the charter. So we're looking at that, and the meeting is, like I said, October 10th, 5 p.m. It'll be, I don't think we're on Zoom. We're on Zoom also, yes, as a matter of fact. So we're also in LegStar as to the meeting time, et cetera. So those are the 2 local items. Now, one other item.
Yeah.
Almost a scary thing, a very scary thing.
Halloween's coming?
No. Elections.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows what might happen? What evil lurks in the heart of men? Only the electorate knows, right? Something like that. I kind of borrowed that from an old radio show, but we won't go there. The other thing I can only beg is that people read the propositions, because of whatever you've heard so far isn't true. If you heard it, it's not true.
Anybody.
You have to read the propositions to really understand everything that is in these things. And a proposition is like an ad on television trying to sell a pickup truck. They'll tell you all the fast and the shiny, but they won't tell you the real nitty gritty that has made some people work very, very hard to get it on a California ballot and make it a part of our Constitution. And things that get made a part of our Constitution stick around for a long time. So you really have to pay attention to ballot propositions.
Most important, show up and vote. Don't just stay home, right? Or send your ballot in.
Show up,
Got mail-in stuff.
know what you're voting about.
Yes.
Yes.
Even on the, I mean, I want to say, even on the elections that aren't presidential elections, there's just as many important items to vote for all of you to vote on. And when you don't vote, you're giving up your rights, so.
So it's an important constitutional right, and everybody should exercise it. So thank you for that, Richard. So with that, let's go to Cindy with our outreach stuff.
Oh, the fun stuff.
Activities.
Yeah, the fun stuff that's happening in El Dorado Hills with the holiday season coming. This weekend, Hand for Hope is having their annual fall festival at El Dorado Hills Town Center on both both Saturday and Sunday. And they have all kinds of fun activities for the kids, and it's a great fundraiser for the Hands for Hope. The farmer's market is continuing every Sunday from 8 to 1 until October 30th. So that's coming to a close, but we still have those every Sunday. On October 22nd, there's the pumpkin splash patch at the El Dorado Hills CSD. Kids go in the pool, the warm pool, and they get to try and find their pumpkin, and then they get to go outside and get out of the pool and then carve it and have fun with the pumpkin. So it's a fun event for the kids. That's from 1 to 3. That same day, October 22nd, there's a punt, pass, and kick competition at Promontory Park. Everybody competes at different age brackets on the different events. That's punting. Probably.
They don't have a category for you?
Go out there, have fun.
Dominate. I'm just saying.
And then Brickyard down in Town Center is continuing having their cornhole tournaments. That's on October 23rd from 1 to 4. The El Dorado Hills CSD is continuing to have their scarecrow contest. So anybody who wants to start building their own scarecrow, you can start that on October 21st. And then the judging will be on October 28th at the El Dorado Hills CSD. And that's from 4 to 6. And also on that day, on October 28th, they have their annual trunk or treat. People will have their cars out there, and they have them all decorated and filled with candy, and the kids just go from car to car getting a safe way to go trick or treating, but it's trunk or treat. It's a super fun event. That's from 4 to 6. And finally, on Halloween, they're going to have a big event down at Town Center where you can go to the different shops and go trick or treating. They also have a contest for everybody's costumes, not only the kids, but also your dogs, the dogs and kids. So everybody, there's all kinds of events there too that they're having there. So that's a really fun event. And it's kind of been away because of COVID, so it's supposed to come back. A big event, and that's from 3 to 6 in Town Center on Halloween. That's it.
Very good. Let's go to APAC.
Cool. Our meeting for October will be next Wednesday, October 12th, be here in this room. It'll be a hybrid meeting like we're doing now, in person and via Zoom. We do have a guest speaker, and that would be the Director of Transportation Department, Rafael Martinez. And Rafael's always been generous with his time coming to talk to us. We did ask him to talk about the El Dorado Hills area road project, the updates, that, like the list that we talked about back in June. So he'll be touching on some of those, but his primary focus will be talking about Measure R, which is a county TOT tax increase that's proposed. There are 2 of them, one for the West Slope and one for the Tahoe region. And what Raphael's talking about is because the west slope TOT, is it 2%? I'm trying to, well,
2%
Raphael will tell us.
increase,
But that 2% will be dedicated solely for the road maintenance fund. So, and that's in the western slope. And right now, it's kind of a small number that'll generate. But over time, we know with Airbnbs, all the hotels we're getting here, there's a potential for that to start contributing in a more significant fashion to our road fund. And we know that that is a challenge for the transportation department in terms of maintaining our roads. You know, we all complain about it, but so this is an opportunity. And, you know, in my 2 cents, as we're talking about it, you know, this is largely a tax we're imposing. There's nobody coming here. It's not typically on ourselves. So if you're inclined to approve any sort of tax, that might be the thing that you would consider at least. So Raphael will talk about that and how it can impact our road maintenance here, primarily in District 1, what we're talking about. And then we'll just have some project updates. Right now, there's nothing technically going on. And this time of year, we're always sort of hesitant because it seems that the project that requires the most volunteer input from our group of volunteers, you know, whether it's an EIR, a draft EIR, whatever, they always sort of hit November, December when everybody's doing their holiday thing. So no word on anything yet, but we'll update on what we know about. And then we'll set our meeting for November where we'll be selecting the nominees for our officers for 2023. I'm looking at Tim real hard. And then we'll have our election.
Right now.
Yeah, we'll have our election in December. So at our December meeting. So that's what we're doing. It's a hoot. Come on down and be entertained.
Very good, thank you. John?
Speaking of Raphael Martinez, DOT Director, we had a meeting with Supervisor Hidahl, myself, and Raphael, and the Bridlewood HOA. And so we had a spirited discussion, and Raphael is making the case for the placement of a roundabout at the Bridlewood entrance to Bass Lake Road. And so we were discussing in detail the merits of that, and I think Raphael is putting together, it was kind of an initial meeting with the leadership and then have a broader meeting with the public to explain to them the justification for DOT's support for doing that roundabout. So it was a good discussion. We threw out a bunch of different options and ideas and stuff, so it was very, so it was a good meeting. So we'll see, and I don't know if there's any other questions. I've already talked about what's at Planning Commission next week, so if you got any questions for me, Planning Commission wise or what, so, but that's all I've got for tonight.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to just cover economic development. Glenn isn't here this evening, so we're just going to defer that one. The healthy communities is the other one I want to touch bases on very briefly. There was a symposium, conference, whatever you want to call it, held last Thursday where a lot of elected officials across El Dorado County, a lot of the nonprofits, a lot of the faith-based, and public safety, a lot of organizations were invited to talk about the divisiveness across the state, but more particularly what we're doing in our county to try to bring people back together. A lot of really good discussion, a lot of ideas. The net result of that is each of the different areas, and there was about 6 different areas. Business was one of them, government was another, public safety was another, et cetera, et cetera. Each of those had kind of their own separate set of actions that they were going to follow up with various types of discussions and maybe public meetings and those kinds of things. So in the group I was in, which was the government group, Brian Bierkamp agreed to be the lead. And I think most of us know Brian's got a lot of experience. He took that on too. So he's going to help coordinate 3 different leads for 3 different areas, one each. And he's going to kind of oversee it and we're going to bring it back together. But the one thing that I thought was a significant takeaway was something that came from the National Conflict Resolution Center, because obviously this is not just a countywide, statewide, it's everywhere, federal government and even outside our country, the Code of Civil Discourse. And so they have proposed 5 different elements in their Code of Civil Discourse, which I'm going to present to the Board of Supervisors and ask if we're willing to adopt this code, because I think it's very important. So it starts by saying we pledge to engage in respectful and constructive civil discourse. Therefore, number 1, We will promote an inclusive environment where diverse perspectives are shared and considered. Number 2, we will listen attentively and ask questions to understand others' positions. Number 3, we will show respect for ideas and views presented even where we disagree. Number 4, we will explain our position by fairly presenting the reasons for them. And number 5, we will avoid personal attacks or other tactics that distract attention from the salient issues. Stay focused, right? We can agree to disagree, but let's don't beat each other up over it, right? So I think this is an important guidance that's being provided to us. And we'll put I'll give you this copy. We can put it out in the minutes and stuff. So if anybody wants to read it, but that was the major quick takeaway, but I'm hoping there will be other results from the different groups that are doing things, because we said we were going to get back together probably after the first of the year to kind of refresh where we are and what is everybody focusing on. But really good start, and it was co-sponsored by the El Dorado Community Foundation, amongst other groups. So there really is a county-wide effort to try to do better in all these areas, and I think it's important. Office of Education, schools, we're involved with it as well. So it really was a good mix of people, and everybody that was there, as far as I could tell, was interested in making things better, not just trying to, continue along the paths that we have, because the social media has been just horrible on a lot of people, and it's not right. So anyway, that's all I had to report on for healthy communities. So I'll just ask, anybody have any final questions? Any go backs?
I will ask on that. So it's beginning of the year for the possible second meeting on that. I was invited and I had to cancel 2 days before, but I was just curious because I didn't see any feedback from how it went. Or,
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'm not sure if anybody's writing up minutes, but that would be the large group stuff. We're encouraged to get together with our small group results and make those happen. But yeah, that was kind of the tentative plan. It's probably the first of the year.
Who's in charge of putting those invites out?
The El Dorado Community Foundation was very engaged in that whole thing. There was a group of people and some of the staff members and some other members of the public that did it. I don't know exactly who by name, but we can certainly find out if you want to. But
Well, yeah. I mean, I'd like to volunteer in the way I
okay.
I-
Yeah, well, and they were focused on people, I think, at the top level decision-making stuff, because the room was filled with probably 120 people. And it's hard to work with that kind of a group when you're doing large group sessions, small group sessions, and everything else. If you get much more than that, you have a very unwieldy thing to try to manage. But as other opportunities come up, yeah, we'll certainly try to make sure that that's an open invitation for people to participate. So with that, I'm just going to announce that our next meeting is Monday, November the 14th. So those who are interested can mark their calendar now. We have not selected a guest speaker. And I'm thinking, well, maybe getting into the holidays, middle of the month, that sort of thing, maybe we'll just defer the guest speaker for the month of November and maybe December. But if anybody has any specific requests of some department within the county or some local organization they'd like to hear from, please let me know what that is. Please let Cindy or I know what that is, and we can reach out and see if we can get them scheduled either in November or some subsequent time frame. But we did finish up our Healthy Communities Forum, and I think we made some good progress with that. There were 3 different sessions, and so I think we're kind of in the, let's just see how all of this settles out, and if some people start responding appropriately to some of the information that's out there. So a lot of good stuff. So any final comments? With that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 6:58. Thank you very much for your attendance and your attention, and really appreciate it.
You bet.